This is episode number 207 featuring artist Ben Bauer.
This is the Plein Air Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called Plein Air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it Plein Air. Others say Plein Air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Oh, thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the Plein Air Podcast. I am happy to announce that the Plein Air Podcast has been rated number one in Feedspot's 2021 Top 15 Podcasts for Painters list. Number one. That's pretty cool. Thank you for doing that. As you probably know, I'm here in Texas, in Austin, Texas, and we had snow-nado. Yeah, it was horrible weather, and those of us who live in Texas are not accustomed to that kind of weather, but more importantly, we're not ready for it. In other words, our pipes are not buried underground. We don't have much insulation in our houses. We have usually electric heat, not any other kind of heat. And it was crazy. The power went out. Our power didn't go out, thankfully. But anyway, it's all gone now. It's melted. It's 70 degrees again. And it was just simply too cold to paint. I love to paint, but I can't paint in 7 below. I mean, it's just too crazy. The house was cold, even with the heat on. We had frozen and broken pipes and some indoor water damage. Really good times. But I didn't paint any of that time because I kept working, surprisingly. Speaking of good times, the Plein Air Salon Art Competition is almost over for the year, and we're going to be awarding winners at our virtual conference in April. It's called Plein Air Live. You have 2 more to enter. You can enter, get your entries in by February 28th, and then again by March 15th. We have a short month in March, but if you win in any particular category, you have the opportunity to be entered in the national competition for the big prizes, which is a $15,000 grand prize, cover of Plein Air Magazine. Of course, there's lots of other prizes, $30,000 in prizes in total. And unlike a lot of competitions, ours is all cash. All cash. So go to pleinairsalon.com and get your entries in. By the way, they don't have to be fresh. You can do your best paintings of all time. And remember, every judge likes something different. So if you've entered before, you didn't get it in, go ahead and re-enter it, because we've had this happen time and again. Somebody will enter a painting, it doesn't win, they'll enter it again, it doesn't win, and then some judge will see it and go, I love that. So that's all it takes. And then, of course, if you're in the national competition, you have a chance to win the big money. Okay, now, since the Plein Air Convention has been canceled, which is very sad, 2 years in a row now, the big plan is for us to all gather, the whole world of painters, joining hands, kind of like that old Coca-Cola commercial. Anyway, joining hands for Plein Air Live. If you've always wanted to go to a Plein Air convention, this is your chance, because it's going to be held online, but it's called Plein Air Live. It's going to be an amazing experience. We've done it once before. We had a massive number of people on, and it's going to be really great. If you check out the faculty, really, really world-class, and we've got some more people that we're adding that are unbelievable. Anyway, check it out at pleinairlive.com and book your ticket by the 28th. That's this Sunday, if you're listening on time. By the 28th, you'll save $600 off the entire full ticket price. And if you're new to Plein Air painting and you just want to try it, you really should just get out there and just do it. We have a beginner's day to walk you through everything you need to know, everything about easels, about all the, what you need to do to be prepared. I'm actually doing that segment. And then we also have basics in all the different kinds of paintings. So you can sample, you get a feel for, pastel and watercolor and oil painting and acrylic and so on. And so it's a gouache. It's a great time to really learn a little bit about everything, and also, how other people deal with plein air painting. So that is going to be on the day before, on the 14th. It's optional, and you can attend that by itself, or you can do that plus Plein Air Live. And a lot of people do both because some of the best artists in the world are teaching on the Beginner's Day, and you're going to see their principles. Even though they may be bringing it down to the basics for beginners, you will still get to see how they paint and how they do things. Coming up in the current issue of Plein Air Magazine, there's a story called The Art of the Journey with Cami Mendlick and Kim K. Spear, and they share their adventures of some of their most spectacular landscape painting trips. This particular one, they're talking about favorite trips from Big Sky, Montana to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and everything in between. So check that out in Plein Air Magazine. It's in Barnes & Noble stores. It's in Michael's stores. And, of course, you can get a subscription. And the digital subscription has 20% more content. You can get it online at pleinairmagazine.com. Also, in this week's Plein Air Today newsletter, you'll find our Plein Air events guide for March of 21. Now, keep in mind, the Plein Air Today newsletter is weekly. It comes out for free. All you got to do is go to outdoorpainter.com and sign up. Just go for outdoorpainter.com, all right? Coming up after the interview, I'm going to be answering your art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute. By the way, the Marketing Minute also has its own podcast. If you want to know about marketing, but you're not wanting to know about plein air painting, well, you can go to the Marketing Minute. All right, let's get right to our interview with Ben Bauer, who is known for his sublime, very, very nice tonalist landscapes. Ben Bauer, welcome to the Plein Air Podcast.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
I'm very excited to talk to you because I'm a big fan of your work. I love your work, and I don't know where you've been, but I just kind of discovered it fairly recently. I'm not sure even where I saw it. Maybe at one of the galleries.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So let's find out how this all began for you. First off, how would you describe yourself as a painter for those people who might not have had the chance to see your work?
For me, the best way that I like to describe it as impressionism, but more a representation of how I see something and how I feel it through my artistic abilities. And I don't know if there's a real good ism to put with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
But I do like working kind of the way that I work in the studio is very much how I would work if I was outdoors.
All right. So
very quick and deliberate. So,
all right. So, not, looking at your work, some of it looks very, very loose and some of it feels very tight. Yet I get the impression that if I were to get on top of it, it would probably look pretty loose.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so how did this all begin for you? First off, where do you live now, and how did this whole painting thing begin?
So I'm in Maplewood, Minnesota, up in the upper Midwest, and it all started for me back in the heyday of the wildlife art print movement back in the 80s and 90s. I grew up in a family that was outdoors a lot, fishing and hunting and just enjoying being outside. And as a kid, I discovered the works of David Maas and Owen Grommy, Michael Sieve, Mark Hansen's another one. I just was just floored by their work. They had a local Wild Wings gallery that would rotate originals around every month, and I would just go in and stare at them forever. Didn't matter who it was just looking at it 2 inches away, trying to figure out how they made things work.
What age were you at the time?
I was around the age 13, 14.
Yeah, and so how did you even get exposed to art in the first place?
My great-grandfather was a billboard sign painter in downtown St. Paul.
Yeah.
And actually did a lot of kind of, I would say, impressionism painting on the side. And I own one of his paintings, actually. And I've seen quite a bit of it. And a lot of people do say there's similarities based between the two. And on the other side, my grandmother was a fantastic piano player. So I think I dabbled on both sides, on my mother and father's side. So
now that you have a professional opinion, if you look at your grandfather's work unemotionally, how did he do?
I think he did very well.
Ah, that's great.
There's one painting that one of my aunts has of my grandma when she was, I think, 2 or 3. It's just incredible to look at.
So he painted from an early age. He obviously, when she was young, so he probably painted his whole life.
Yep, and my grandmother was born in Sweden, and they came over here shortly after that. So,
and
Emil Hagstrom was his name.
Emil Hagstrom, and do you know if he ever did anything with his career from a standpoint of a painting?
I don't really know, and none of the family really knows. There's a lot of paintings around. I actually photographed quite a few of them a number of years ago, and we kind of sold prints to all of the family that couldn't own any original. So it's kind of a fun thing to do.
Yeah, nice. So you went to a local gallery. You fell in love with these paintings, and then what happened?
And then I just started basically kind of doodling around with things with different paints that I had here. And I went out and I bought one of my first paint sets was, I think, a Bob Ross set, because I didn't know anything about it back at the time, back at Dick Blick. So I just started getting into playing around with oil paint and how it worked and all the materials and all of those kinds of things. I was into drawing soft pastels and oil pastels. It was just kind of one of those things that once I started doing it, I was very involved in doing a lot of wildlife, particularly ducks, geese, upland game birds.
Uh-huh. Did you ever get a chance? Did you ever get a chance to see your grandfather paint?
No.
That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, but neither of your parents picked it up.
Nope.
So you started doing these wildlife paintings. What happened next?
What happened next is I started kind of drifting a little bit. Being an outdoorsman, to me, it was a heck of a lot more than hunting. Just being out in a field in the middle of November when it's raw, windy, and cold. It's just how gorgeous and how still everything is. I started to pay more reverence to that in terms of adding the birds into it. So I went from that point, I was kind of transitioning into college. And I went to the UW Stout and got a degree in painting, studio art, my BFA in painting, studio art.
And then after that, what happens?
So throughout my college career, I had two professors that I'm still in touch with to this day that saw what I was trying to do, where I was trying to go, and they pushed me and they kind of stretched my bounds a little bit, which I thought was very, at the time, I was focused on what I wanted to do, but I'm very grateful now for.
This is high school where these two teachers are working with you, right?
This was college.
Oh, college. Okay. So was it a local college or an art college?
It was the University of Wisconsin Stout. So I'm in the Twin Cities. It's about an hour east of me.
All right.
It was a fantastic school to go to.
Yeah. So you had intention at that time of becoming a professional painter. Yes? No?
Yes.
All right. So what happened? Did that happen? Did you become a professional?
So the number one thing that I wanted to do is when I got out of college, I wanted to get a job that I could get on my feet, make it through the summer, figure out where I was going, what I wanted to do. And it was the major thing that I wanted to do is get my master's so I could teach college.
Right. And you wanted to teach art?
Yep.
Yep.
I had such a passion for, my mentality has always been the coaching. And even when we can get into it a little bit more, my former job was a management role, and just coaching people and working with them on the things that they want to get better at is very important and very interesting thing that I want to explore once I get my feet underneath me here. So,
all right. So you graduate from school. You immediately go into teaching, I assume?
I actually ended up at a very, very, very wonderful small business in the printing industry. And I got my foot in the door there, and things progressed, and was actually with them for 16 years.
So much for the teaching degree.
Yeah.
And
to get back to that, a lot of the professors that I had, the work that I was doing, they said would be at that time would have been hard for me to get into a master's program.
Because
of the realm of the work that I was doing. It wasn't kind of the activism, the more progressive work that was going on. That was the big ticket that people were looking for to get accepted into those programs. So I kind of wanted to wait a little bit and just continue painting. I have it in me to do it almost on a daily basis in some form. And at that point, I just figured I've got a really good job. We were starting a family. Things were progressing, moving forward. And I just ended up painting almost every single night and on the weekends to be able to develop a path for me to go down and where my work could go while working simultaneously. And it fared very well for a long time.
Well, it's a really great way to fund a career, because every career has to go through some learning experiences and some hiccups and some problems. And if you just go cold turkey, then, you might find yourself needing money. And so having something like that, the downside is you don't get to paint full time, but sounds like you managed to do it. You managed to do both.
I did both very successfully, and 2020 on a personal level, on a professional level, and emotional level, as we all know, took its toll on us. And as I continued to work throughout the year, I found a way to make it work, where I would be able to sustain myself, give myself enough time to get an inventory of work built up, that I can flush out all of these ideas that I have right now, that I could flush out, get a body of work done, and within a couple of weeks start developing the classes that I do want to start teaching.
And then you're going to teach them how?
Some of them are going to, it's looking right now, will be some plein air classes.
Some workshops?
I'm looking at
workshops?
Yep. Some workshops. And then I want to do a class on materials, because when I was younger, I had such art materials in general is such a fascinating thing to me, and all the technological advances that we have and all of these different realms of surfaces and materials to use. So I'm really looking at taking the knowledge that I've built over the years and getting a materials class together, because to me, it doesn't seem like very many people are focusing on that.
Well, let's take a left turn right now. Let's talk about materials. You got a lot of artists at all different kinds of levels. You have some that are experienced pros listening, and you have others who are novice. Some people maybe don't even paint who are listening. Millions around the world, probably 90 or 120 countries. What would you say about materials? What are some of the key essentials that are really important for people to understand?
So materials, I think, in the terms of studying and experimenting, is a very, very important tool for us artists to be able to, it helps. For me, I look at it as part of the process. It's part of developing an idea. What surface do you want it to be on? And as you start to study and practice with these different materials, whether it's canvas or linen or on a wood panel, traditionally primed, acrylic primed, all sorts of different avenues that you can go, I think you start pinpointing what suits your style and your temperament with the paint a lot easier. And then you can start developing all of these different paths going off of it. Mm-hmm. And I come from a family of a very, very strong work ethic that was, if you want a cabin or a garage, you make one. You put it together yourself. You don't hire anybody to do it. So that was driven into me at a very young age. So most of the paintings that I do, if it's on a board, I pretty much cut the board out myself. I primed it and prepped it and got it ready to paint on.
Make your own frames?
I don't have the ability to do that yet, but it's something I would love to look into.
Okay. So let's talk about plein air painting. When did that enter the scene for you?
That entered the scene essentially right when I got out of college. So that would have been 2004. From about 2004 through 2010, I pretty much plein air painted all the time. Every painting that I did during that time period was usually outside on location.
But you're working in a full-time job at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it would be at night when I would get home, or I would go out very early on the weekend. Would be able to at the time that we were doing that, we didn't have children yet, so it made it a lot easier.
Yeah. It's funny how they have a tendency to impact our time.
Very much so.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I have two girls, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Oh, how glorious. It's the best.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. So.
Yep. So you got a lot of time. You got a lot of time behind the easel outdoors. How did that change your work?
That changed my work because it was something that when you're on location, when you have direct observation of what's going on, you're aware of all the surroundings, the observation levels for me amplified, being well aware of how a grass line meets a tree line, or how the sky meets the horizon in a landscape painting, and how that interaction goes back and forth, and how to create vibrations with colors and values and shapes and all of those kinds of things. It really opened up my eyes to what was out there. The best way to explain it, I think plein air painting did for me, was I was out west to Colorado back in 2008, and then 2016 I was there again, and I said I wish I would have been able to see Colorado 6 years ago the way that I do now, in terms of what the things that I'm looking for, the light, the way certain patterns are in the sky and on the ground. So for me, it's all about observation and getting that basis of being there.
And how much are you doing now? Or you are not working in this other job now. You've gone full-time as an artist.
I've gone full-time as an artist as of a week ago.
Oh, this is brand new.
Brand new, yeah.
Wow,
brand
congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's quite a ride. I've been painting indoors because there's a lot of commitments that I have to, indoors, I mean my workspace indoors. But within the next week or so, temperatures are warming up in Minnesota, where it makes it a lot easier to get outside and paint. And I live very close to a lot of paintable areas. So I'm very excited about this next little stint that I can get in and get back into that sensory, that observation, that connection.
Well, it's a great time to get out too, because the trees haven't started budding yet, I would imagine. And so you can get some of those raw stick trees, some of those kind of brown farms with snow left over. Probably some pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's gorgeous here. The Midwest has a lot to offer in very short distance of terrain, so trying to pay reverence to that.
So what do you look for in a subject? What really turns you on?
Right now, the three kind of motifs that I'm working with are the nocturne, the farm. I call them farm portraits at night. It's kind of my working mentality with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started doing a lot of these little, really quick, smaller, like 8x10, 8x12 hunting motifs of hunters walking in blazed orange in a field. So it's the landscape, and then all you see is a little orange dot. Because that's the memories that I have growing up that connected me to this entire focus that I'm on with my artwork. So, and then the other one is just a lot of, again, farm portraits by daytime. I say farm portraits because each one of the farms around here has its own little niche in the landscape, what it's producing, what it's doing. In college, I was exposed to quite a few friends that have family farms, and got to understand and really appreciate everything that farmers put into their livelihood. So it's very interesting to connect the landscape that I'm so used to with a bit of somebody's, a portrait of what they do for a living, and how I can frame that up best through my voice.
Yeah, fabulous. So I would encourage everybody to go to Ray's Gallery website and look at your work there, or maybe your website, because it's fabulous. You've got a real sense of feel on these farm portraits, as you call them.
Thank you.
So farms are not, you're doing nocturne paintings in the farms, but also daylight paintings. Are you going out at night and capturing these subjects? What's the process like for you?
So back, I would say about 4 or 5 years ago, I tried the outdoor photography at night. And to me, it's a very, very hard thing, I think, to photograph the way that our eyes see at night. So I started to dabble with the photography. I actually went out with a friend who's a professional that I worked with, and, just couldn't get the feeling that I get when I'm there. I lived out towards the country, so I would get out at 10 o'clock and just go park somewhere that's very dark and just let my eyes adjust and then be able to take everything in. And it's amazing how much blue and how much green there is at night in the winter here in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So I started making notes of the things that I was seeing and how the light was entering and hitting certain things and what colors it was. Because at that time I didn't have a setup, and it was very cold out, and it was very hard to paint in a car somewhere at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I started to do a lot of research with George Soder's work, Frank Tenney Johnson, Dan Metz, who's local wildlife artist here, is fantastic at them. There's a lot of different painters in past and present that are doing just amazing work. And then I started to do a couple of them, and I started to really feed off of the enjoyment of the process of taking the things that you would see during the day and kind of sculpting them and imagining what they're going to look like at night with this new light setting on them. So there's a lot of different things sometimes where I'm not actually there, so I'll make a little model barn or a model to be able to see the way the fused light is hitting something and how the reflected light works. And so I'm doing a lot of those things.
So tell me about model making. That's something I don't hear very much. I know Maxfield Parrish made models of the houses and things that he was doing paintings of.
It's actually quite interesting because when I was a youngster, I got a book on Owen Grommy, who is a wildlife master. People don't know, it's a great artist to look up. They lived in Wisconsin, and there was a lot of photos from the books in that book that he had, that he would have a Canada goose that looked like he had carved it out of wood, that put bendable parts in the wings and stuff like that, so he can model how certain things looked and how the light would hit it. So I started just doing little foam cutouts of a barn to see where that shadow would fall if something was behind it. Kind of creating my own realm, if you will.
So it's kind of plein air cheating.
Very much so, with a very limited available time at that point in my life. So I was able to make it work. And then as these nocturnes started developing, I started playing with different palettes of greener, or some that were a little bit bluer, or some that were a little bit more gray, just depending on what's going on in the atmosphere. And when I was out taking notes and things like that, it was things that I was picking up and noticing.
Well, I think if you're painting from life, even if you're painting still life from life, it's a better experience, and then you're really getting a sense of form and a sense of light. I think that's pretty cool. So you have one of the great nocturne painters right there in your area, Carl Bretsky. Have you gotten to paint with him?
No, I haven't. I don't think we've formally met, but we've been exchanging on social media and those kinds of things, and I got to get a chance to meet him.
Yeah, we just did a nocturne video with him. It's fabulous. He studied a lot of those guys you mentioned. Fabulous work. So now that you have this, this opportunity to kind of like go free, 100% full-time, first time out, 100%, what's your plan?
My plan, like I said, was to, right now I work pretty closely with Howard Rays at the Rays Gallery, who is just a tremendous, they're like family to me, the relationship that we have and our workability and how things are developing. So I'm working alongside him with some of the things that I've got going on. There's little projects that I want to do that I don't know if I'm going to get into kind of divulging what some of them are right now, but they pertain to painting outside, doing a series of paintings outside and getting my feet back out in the snow in the woods somewhere.
And have you considered as part of your new career to get into the whole plein air movement, to get out there at some of the events? Yeah,
I did the Door County for 3 years back in the early 2010s. And it was just a fascinating time. I loved being outside. I loved interacting with potential collectors and just generally people who are interested in what we were doing. And I haven't been back to one of those events since. But again, like I said, it's something that I'm very interested in and looking into and seeing what direction I can take this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a lot of fun. A lot of work, but a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I'm doing is there's a couple of painters out there. We live in kind of the heart of the driftless area of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, and Iowa, where we have a lot of really interesting terrain with a lot of bluffs and then valleys with farms in them. It's a geological, just a fantastic place, and a lot of the paintings that I've been doing lately are from that area. But I was thinking about doing a trip all the way around and doing the big loop and painting along the way on that, kind of a journey of that area, very similar to what a couple of artists have done, that the group that did that Lewis and Clark expedition several years ago, with that kind of purpose in mind.
Sounds like a lot of fun. So I think it would be nice to share some ideas with people on painting, maybe some technique ideas. This is something that we always get questions about. People are always asking about, how do I move up? How do I get to the next level? It sounds like you've given a lot of thought to teaching. This might be a good opportunity to do a little bit of teaching.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. There's a lot of local artists around here that I've been in contact with in making this decision, and I've been doing a lot of research on classes that people are offering and really looking at, I don't want to reinvent the wheel by any means, but I would just like to take a fresh approach to it, and that's why materials is one of them, and composition is another, and a lot of the theoretical parts of it I think are interesting things to look at as well. Why we do why are we so driven by this scene that we took a picture of, or we were standing in front of and did a study, but now we want to do a studio painting from it. What are the elements? What do we want to say with it?
How would you say your studio work changes compared to your plein air work?
I honestly think if I wouldn't have taken that kind of, it wasn't consecutive days, but that 5 years of painting outside, I don't think personally and professionally I would be where I am without it. Because again, I'll go back to that direct observation and that connection that you have to a painting on location. It can be a study for a larger painting, or sometimes they just work as little works on their own, and that they just, leave it where it lies and maybe grow another idea from that. There's a lot of times that a lot of paintings that I've done on location were done in a certain way, but you revisit them with a different palette or editing certain elements that you left out and you're putting back in, or those kinds of things. That's the real interesting play with all of it, is getting to the point, even when you're plein air painting, is letting the intuition part take over.
So maybe you could give us some ideas, some tips on composition, for instance.
For me, the one thing that I've always tried to do is define composition and how people see things and how they're always framing them. For me, everything that I'm doing, if something catches me a certain way, if I'm looking out a window, I'm trying to frame the major elements of it to make it as pleasing to me personally as I can. So a lot of the focal points on a square will be within that kind of golden rule, if you will. But there are times too where it's kind of fun to break that if you can do it correctly. Like you take a square painting and trying to put some kind of a diagonal in it, or trying to crop something so you get movement going. Clyde Aslovic always talks about movement and texture and a lot of those kinds of things. And that's really the thing that I'm looking at right now, is how to build textures to play into the composition of bare tree branches right now. We look at them and we see sticks and twigs, but there's masses behind them, and how you start developing and pushing and pulling. If a lot of the social media that I've got on Facebook and Instagram is really playing with that right now. A lot of bare trees, and how those minor small things can become very, very important in composition building.
Well, to me, that's a very difficult subject to paint too, bare trees, because the tendency is to over twig, if you know what I mean.
Yep. And the best part right now that I'm learning to do is using different materials and different surfaces that hold the paint a certain way. And then if you do certain actions and motions with the brush, you can start getting a lot of really neat effects happening. And you can let that layer dry and then go on top of it with warms and cools and start bouncing things back and forth. And then all of a sudden you start to get that motion going, where it seems like there's individual twigs that you can touch. But like you had mentioned at the very beginning of this, it looks like that 5 to 8 feet away, but when you're up close, it's just organized chaos, is what the term that I like to put.
Nothing turns me on more than to see a painting that really reads beautifully from a distance, and you get on top of it and it's completely abstract.
Yep. So I would say right now the biggest thing that I'm trying to do is paint quality in my work right now. Is understanding what it looks like 8 to 10 feet back, and then how it looks up front, because I started to think about those days when I was looking at those David Moss originals 2 inches away, and how he did certain things and how he made it colors work right next to each other, and paint application is really the focal point, I think, in building this kind of body of work for 4 to 6 weeks that I'm doing right now. I'm working every day. So it's kind of the best way to put where I'm at with these first couple of weeks. And then, like I said, I'm just going to start diving into building syllabuses, and I've got a list of people that were interested in taking classes, and then there's a couple of venues that I've got lined up to do some of those locally, and we'll see where they go.
So why don't
I'm
you?
Very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. At this particular point, why don't you, for the people who are listening, give them some ideas. For instance, what's your best advice to somebody who just decides that they want to take up painting or take up plein air painting? What's your best advice for them?
Is that if you want to do it and you're serious about it, to just get out and do it. Put yourself there. Like I was explaining, I have a very inquisitive mind, and I think somebody who wants to take up painting is there because they've taken that first step to want to do it, and then they start going out and learning how color works and how masses and shapes, and then how you start breaking things down from there down to value, and how you start driving what you want your paintings to say. There are a lot of different skill levels that everybody contains, and there's a starting point for everybody, and getting to that next goal is something that I would love to be able to have a part in helping somebody get to that stage. So I've been so fortunate in the 40 years that I've been alive with people being able to do that for me. So it'd be nice to be able to pay that forward.
Well, this is your big chance right now. You've got all these people listening, so you can impart some wisdom on them.
Yeah. The best I had the best advice that I had gotten was from two artists that know each other several years apart, and one of them said the best advice is to draw, and that was from wildlife artist Ron Van Gilders, whose studio I was invited to when I was 15 years old. He did a demo on how to paint the transparent water scenes that he does, and he's an absolute master at it. And he said, the only thing I can tell you to do is draw, and everything will fall into place. And then the other one that I'll mention, and I do this quite a bit because he's done such a huge mark on what I've done with my artwork since I got out of college, is had a lot of conversations with Mark Hansen, who I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the exact same thing. Just right now, continue to paint. Paint what's in you to paint, and paint it the way that you want to do it, and things will start falling into place. So I started doing that. I started getting some local commissions. Things started to pick up locally. And then I posted a painting that I did of a commission after it was delivered. And that's how I connected with Howard Ray's. Was just continuing to just push forward. It's something that I wanted to do, that was in me to do, and that's kind of my way of looking at it, or explaining to somebody that wants to do it. The little motivation behind it is, if you have the time and you have the want to do it, just get yourself involved in any way that you can.
Absolutely. That's the advice I got when I first started plein air painting, is that the guy, Kevin Corder, said, go out, do 100 quick paintings, 30 minutes of painting, small 8x10 paintings, just get out and do 100 of them. And then after you've done 100, do another 100, just keep painting.
It's exactly it. I've moved a couple of times in the past couple of years, and every time we have to do a flushing of all of the work that's built up that's not going anywhere, that help get me to the point that I'm at. So there's a lot of pushing and pulling involved in it, and it's a beautiful thing if you sit back and kind of enjoy that process.
Absolutely. And so what's next? You're just kind of starting out this whole new career. It's so exciting. Are you going to seek out other galleries? You're going to start, you talked about how you're going to start potentially doing some events. What else?
Yeah, I'd like to start doing some events, there's an absolute desire for more representation. And that's something that I've been kind of, going with Howard back and forth on. It's just kind of what fits the kind of the market that I'm in, the kind of work that I'm doing, and where things are looking. Because I'm very pinpointed right now to the Midwest, but I want to expand a little bit. I would like to. One of my goals is within the next 2 years is to be able, granted everything, we can travel again safely, is I want to get over to the English countryside. And it's long been a dream for me, and to be able to get over there and look at it through the same lens of how I look at things here.
Yeah, go to Constable Country and check that out. Well, I can make some introductions to people over there. You probably can get a free room from time to time.
Oh, that would be great. Like I said, that's been a dream of mine.
Well, this is all temporary. We'll get through it. We don't know how long it's going to last, but we'll get through it together. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is absolutely fun. I really love to hear stories about people who have finally broken free. As you know, I teach art marketing at the Plein Air Convention and other places, and I did a whole series on how to break free from a job, and I think it sounds like you followed exactly the advice. I probably didn't even know I was saying those things, but it's nice to see somebody, the rocket about to take off, and saying, okay, I managed to get to the point where I could leave my job. You've got a great gallery. You've got probably some good income started, and now the whole future is in front of you, and pretty exciting, and you're doing really beautiful work.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And to me, that's the best part. That's the fun part of this right now, is where is it going to go? I'm putting all the hard work in and seeing what happens. I'm at a point right now that if I didn't take the opportunity that's kind of presented to me, I didn't want to look back at it and kind of regret it. So I'm taking the bull by the horns right now and going for it.
Well, that's exactly the right thing to do. It's not sometimes it's never perfect time, but you just got to go for it sometimes. If you're listening to this, listen to what Ben is saying, because I think that's really important. I do think that it's best to have your career started, get your experience, get to the point where you're selling a certain amount of work before you pull the plug on your other job. But at some point, you got to let go and say, all right, I'm ready. And it's not easy. I'm sure you were holding your breath and probably a little concerned about that.
Yeah, this has been on my mind since about July. And then it really picked up in October. And the industry that I was in and the company that I work for, there was no way that I could. We have a very busy season during the holidays in the printing industry for gifts. And there's no way that I could walk away coming up to where it was in the management position that I had. So I wanted to make sure that this was what I wanted to do. And like I said, I love the job that I had that I quit last week was a job that I love getting up and going to every day. So I'm very fortunate to be able to carry that over into what I'm doing right now. So
now the key is following that same discipline, not allowing yourself to slip up and say, well, I think I deserve to sleep in for a couple of months.
Yep. No, that is not the case right now. I'm up. I've got a daily scheduler out of what my plan is and just hitting those marks every single day. So.
Well, you've got a great support system up that way. And, there's a lot of really great artists out in the Minneapolis area, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And, you'll have a little bit more time to kind of get to know some of these people and interact with them and become kind of part of that community. I don't know how far away you are, but it seems to me like that's a really great way to kind of get connected and get to the next level, is by being around other great artists.
100%. And that's why I kind of reached out to quite a few of them that are around this area. Like, hey, I'm looking at doing this. What are your thoughts? We had a really good conversation on it, and they've been doing it for a while, and they've been sustaining, and they asked what my plan was and kind of went through it. And it was very encouraging to have those conversations. So
Yeah, absolutely.
it's great to be able to rely on, even as much as posting a painting that you're working on and people commenting on it. It's one of those things that kind of keeps your interest going and keeping you wanting to come back and try it.
Yeah. Performing for social media.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily call it that, but it can help.
Well,
the social media things are a good thing.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, I would agree with that. So what else should we be talking about that we haven't touched on yet?
The last one that I had was just, and I've done a couple of articles on this, is just the process of painting and how you approach an idea that you have, or how you want to push it in a different direction, and how do you start that? Do you use a painting that you did on location somewhere? Do you use a photograph from somewhere? Do you do this? Do you do that? I've actually started playing around with the iPad Pro, and actually there's a program on there that I'm able to use that I can take a photo of the painting that I'm working on if it's just not working out, and can use the pencil to be able to edit things out and add new things into it.
What is the program? Procreate?
I'm actually using Adobe Fresco.
Fresco. Not heard of that one.
And it's an amazing tool. I can go out and photograph something and then add elements to it if I see that the structure, the bones of what I'm looking for are there, but I just need to add something. You can go in pretty detailed and start doing a lot of those things. So that's a friend of mine, David Sharp, is the one that I first started paying attention to using those kinds of apps and tools and things like that are at our disposal now. And I figured, why the heck not try it and see what it can do? And it's just been almost every painting that I've been working on, I'm taking a photo of it and tweaking certain elements.
Well, I think that's nice. Sometimes you're staring at a painting trying to figure out what to do with it, and you got to leave it sometimes. And why not take a picture of it, bring it into your iPad when you're sitting in the house at night, and just keep noodling with it until you figure out your right composition or what's missing, and then go back and finish painting it. I think it's a great tool. I think that most of the great artists would have used any of the tools that were available to them. There are some purists who might not, but I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and I just look at it as an aid that helps me not let something sit too long, because honestly, there are times there's 4 or 5 unfinished, larger sized paintings that I've got that never made it to the end. And this actually helps me get to that ending point quicker. So it stays fresh with me and I can move on and start something new. And that's kind of the mentality, the bulldozer mentality that I have right now, is I've got all these ideas that I've been kind of putting into a folder on my computer or notes, and just kind of pushing these off to the side until I could get to this point that we're at right now, and I'm able to start kind of flushing those ideas out.
Right.
Which
sense.
Is the exciting part and what I spent a large portion of today doing. So
cool. Well, we're all very excited for you, and we're glad that you made it onto the Plein Air Podcast. We like Rising Stars, and it's nice to see that Howard and Ray's Galleries has stepped up and brought you into the gallery. That's a significant piece. That's a great gallery, one of the finest in America, and
I would agree 100%. Yeah.
So to be in a place like that is a really good signal about what's going to happen with your career. And you're doing beautiful work, and it's got a lot of sensitivity to it. And I congratulate you for that.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for being on the Plein Air Podcast. We've loved having you here today.
All right. Thank you very much. And I enjoyed every second of this. So thanks again, Eric.
Thanks again to Ben Bauer, and good luck to him in the launch of his new full-time venture. He's been part-time up to now, so that's pretty cool. I love it. I love it. I love to see somebody going full-time and really taking the chance. I like to teach that too. Are you guys ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
Thank you. And in the Marketing Minute, I answer your art marketing questions. You can email yours to me, eric@artmarketing.com. By the way, that's a great resource with lots of marketing content. Just go to eric@artmarketing.com. Just go to artmarketing.com, but you can find me there if you want to send in a question. This is a question from Grant Hankla of Little Rock, Arkansas, who says, I've heard you talk about strategy versus tactic. Can you speak to that in regards of selling my art? Is it better to have a strategy or a tactic if I'm a beginner? Well, Grant, it's both. Everybody needs both. You see, let me see if I can explain this for you. A strategy is how you present yourself and what your meaning is. Now, let me use a different brand, something that's non-art. Walmart. What is Walmart's strategy? Walmart's strategy is, behind the scenes, their strategy is probably selling a lot of volume, meaning selling tons and tons of stuff, because their strategy says they are always the lowest prices, always, right? So we know that the Walmart strategy is lowest prices. The tactic is something you do to reinforce what your strategy is, like advertising. So you need to know how you're going to present yourself. What is the meaning of Grant Hankla as an artist, right? So it might be, let's think about some painters that we know. Joseph McGurl is one of, does some of the most incredible landscape paintings on earth, or John Stobart is known as a historic sailboat painter, or Chris Blossom is known as a sailboat painter. That's kind of what you want to be known as. Now, you could be known as a portrait painter, or you could be known as a mural painter, or something else, and you might even have something you attach to it. Like I'm known as a expensive portrait painter, like Nelson Shanks, rest in peace. You knew that if you went to Nelson Shanks, you're going to pay $80 or $100 or $150,000 for a portrait. So that's part of your strategy. And now how you make your strategy happen is you need tactics, and the tactics are things like promotions and advertising and newsletters, email blasts. Those are tactics. So we all need both. Tactics without strategy is not sending a consistent message. But when you have those tactics employed, then you need to always reinforce the strategy. So every time you see a Walmart ad, what do they say? Lowest prices. Always lowest prices. Always. Right? Every ad they do, that reinforces that tactic. And so what you really have to do, you have to kind of, especially when you're first starting yourself out, you kind of want to get branded as something. If you don't get branded as something, then it's going to confuse the audience. I have a lot of painters who say, well, I do portraits, I do this, I do that. That's okay. But the problem is you're going to confuse people. So kind of get known for something. Howard Turpinning is known for doing paintings of Native Americans and cowboys. But if he started doing flower paintings early on in his career, he'd be confusing people. So he's known for that. Now he can do anything he wants now because he's big, and you can do anything you want when you're big. But in the beginning, you want to get known for something. So we need those tactics and we need the strategy. You need to decide who you are, what you stand for, what your brand stands for. Now, the next question comes from Ray Adams in Chicago, Illinois. Ray says, I just got into my first gallery, and I wonder if it's okay to approach more galleries or if it's better to stay loyal to just one. Well, I have a lot of answers to that, Ray, and let me start out by saying I think that, first off, your gallery relationship is really critical, and the goal of a good gallery relationship is for it to be one that is symbiotic. In other words, you and the gallery person need to be strategizing about your career. I just gave advice to a gallery, to a person today. He's in a very big, very well-known gallery, and he's only in that one gallery, and his entire income is based on that one gallery. And I said to him, what happens if that gallery goes out of business? And he said, well, they're big. They're not going to go out of business. I said, well, I've seen big galleries go out of business. So what happens? Well, I would have to get another gallery. And then, well, it takes time to build up your career. It takes time to get you known to their collectors. So I said, what I would do is I'd call your gallery and say, listen, I don't want all my eggs in one basket. I want to work with you. And I'd like to get into ideally about 3 galleries. That way I've got some balance in case somebody goes under, and I've got some, I get spread out regionally and so on. So call them up and have a discussion and say, listen, I don't want to compete with you, but I also want to be in some good galleries. Can you recommend somebody that you feel is of the quality that is equal to your gallery? And then let's work on that together. And then, of course, they can make introductions and help you get in, which saves you a lot of time and trouble. But I think, I like to have the idea of having things spread out among 3 galleries minimum. And, you might not be able to give them all a whole lot of work, and they may or may not like that. But ultimately, you've got to think about your career, and you got to think about what's best for you. Because if somebody goes away suddenly, and we've watched that happen in bad economies where I had an artist friend, he was in 5 galleries, 3 of them went bankrupt. And so what was he to do? He had to get more galleries just in case the other 2 went under because they weren't selling much. So I think just the general thing, Ray, is you want to keep the quality. You want to be in the highest quality gallery you can be in. And a lot of that has to do with your reputation, your strategy. It also has to do with how good you are. And sometimes we start out in a weaker gallery and move up to a stronger gallery. Certainly has been the case for me. So I think that it's good. It's not about being loyal. It's about being loyal to yourself. And if you're upfront about it and you say, listen, Charlie at Charlie's gallery, how many paintings a year are you expecting to sell from me, and how many do you need? And Charlie says, okay, the number is 12 or 15 or 20, whatever the number is. You say, okay, I'm going to focus on giving you 12 really good paintings this year, or 20 or whatever, but I need to be able to also get some paintings in Gallery B and Gallery C. And, maybe I'll only give them 5 each or 6 each, but at least they're establishing themselves for you, getting you some collectors, and then you've got a backup plan in the event something goes wrong. That's my opinion on galleries. Anyway, that's kind of how I think about art marketing in this particular instance.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Well, I want to remind you guys that Plein Air Salon needs to be entered. Just get it in before the 28th of February and again by the March 15th deadline. You can enter them both, but not at the same time. You'll have to go back. Go to pleinairsalon.com. Also, remind you that you got to sign up before the 28th for Plein Air Live, the virtual conference online. You can sign up later, but you'll end up paying more. You're going to save $600 off of the full retail price if you get in now, and there's some good prices. Make sure to check out the Beginner's Day if you're a beginner. That's pleinairlive.com. And we have people attending. The last conference we did, we had 40 countries around the world and a lot of people from a lot of different places. We had a huge number from Australia. And of course, if you can't make the dates for whatever reason, don't be leery about it. Just go anyway. Remember, there's 100% money back guarantee, and you can get replays. And there's different lengths of replays depending on which package you invest in. And so you'll be able to kind of get whatever it is that you need. You can get up to a year. So anyway, check it out, pleinairlive.com. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is that I'm on social media doing a live broadcast daily at 12 noon and daily at 3 p.m. 12 noon, I'm doing live interviews and painting with artists, and daily at 3 p.m. I'm doing interviews with artists and segments from the art instruction videos we've produced, and discounts on those. Both are artist painting, so you can check it out. Best way to find it is go to youtube.com and search for Streamline Art. When you find us, hit the subscribe button and hit the little notification bell. That way it'll ding whenever we come out with something new. You'll be notified. And that's also where you can find all the entire archive of everything we've done there. So we've been on for many, 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 many days since coronavirus quarantine began, and you don't want that to go away. So if you go there and subscribe, you'll be able to get it all. And we want to see you joining us live, too. That'd be really terrific. If you've not seen my blog, where I talk about life and art and philosophy and lots of other things, check it out. It's called Sunday Coffee, and you can find it at coffeewitheric.com. And it's free. All right. Well, this is fun. We'll do it again sometime, like next week, God willing. I will see you then. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. You can find us online at outdoorpainter.com. Remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. See ya.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.